Hello, welcome. My name is Cassandra Haight, and I work for the Pitt Alumni Association. We are joined here today with Beth Gentner, who's going to talk with us a little bit about life, loans, and financial freedom.
I was a graduate of the Department of Education, the University of Pittsburgh. I am currently the president of Shenley Capital. We're a independent registered investment advisory firm. We're located out in Sewickley, and I have been working there and growing the firm for about 25 years. We provide money management, financial planning, and we also do a little bit of life insurance. So we felt that it was just very important to have a voice and that the clients would have a voice and that we would be collaborative and that we would be holistic, which means that we help people with their financial planning, their budgeting, their college savings, retirement, and also securing their lives and helping with their estates. So it's sort of like the whole gambit from a young person, and we have some teenagers that work with us, clients, kids, all the way up to retirees in their 90s. So,
Fantastic.
yes, so we enjoy our work and we love solving problems for clients.
I love to hear that. Can you connect the dots for me? How did your Pitt degree help you?
I can connect the dots. And how I think about it is I was actually studying not only education, but in the sort of realm of exercise physiology. So while it seems like it's a far distance, I use all the skills that I received at Pitt. I took a lot of statistics, I took anatomy, I took education, and we're constantly educating our clients. And I'm constantly educating myself. I've done different certificates. I'm constantly taking courses. I took financial courses. I took investment courses, both here and, at other schools. While it seems like it's a far way, I was always very interested in business, and my exercise physiology really geared me, and I studied a lot about it. And I studied at that time in the early 90s about fitness. And so that intrigued me. And then I realized I was really more interested in actual business and investments and finance rather than exercising corporate fitness individuals. So that's the dot connection.
Yeah, I love asking people that question because there is no typical route, right? There is no A to B path almost anymore. So it's always so nice to hear that at Pitt, you get a well-rounded education regardless of your degree.
Yeah, it's a constant education
I
and
love
a
that.
lifelong sort of learner. It's really important for people to know that it's not just step by step by step by step. You have to be on this path. You can pivot and open up your own business. You could pivot and work for a large company and then work for a small company and work for a startup. And there's so many choices.
I don't think it would be an assumption to say that top of mind for a lot of students would be the topic of student loans.
A big topic, and I think it makes a lot of people nervous, and they're paying off. We have a number of clients that are still paying off their student loans. So it's something that we do talk about a lot, and it's very important to really dive in and understand exactly what type of loan you have and what your interest rate is, and can you change the interest rate? Look into some of this forgiveness programs. There's teacher forgiveness programs. They're in the healthcare industry. They're all over. So you really have to look to see where you can get help and where you can find information and knowledge. You have to have a good, at least relationship either online or, diving into your loan and exactly what you have. And some people have a couple of different types of loans. So it's important to understand them instead of just sort of close your eyes and say, well, I guess it's a mountain and I'm just going to have to pay it off. So there are a lot of things. Maybe you can lower down the interest rate. Many times you can talk to employers and they will take over the entire loan. You would want to look at what the highest rates are, the interest rates. And again, the student loans are all different. And when you got the loan at a different time than maybe it is now in the interest rate environment, it's important to look at the interest rate. So you start off with the highest one and pay that off first, and then you move down the ladder. So, and you just work to pay those off and pay them off in full. So you want to be careful not to just be paying off the interest. So you want to be paying off part of the interest and then part of the principal. And if you're only paying the interest, then you're never really paying down the actual principal part of the loan. And so you're paying forever. So that's really important to really look at the loans and the interest rate and then pay them off in of the highest to the lowest.
I thought that comment about asking employers about forgiveness was so intriguing because it's not something that you hear very often.
I know. Well, we give clients the idea, and you're correct. A lot of people don't think about it. But when you go to apply for a job, that is your perfect time to ask for everything.
Hmm.
And we do a lot of counseling of people of all ages about how they negotiate their offer.
Mm.
And the more you ask for, the more you'll be surprised that you'll get. Now, maybe you won't, maybe they are not so confident about you. It's right out of college or with a graduate degree. Maybe it's something that if they do not offer to help you, you bring that up again and you'd say, well, I'd like to talk about this at my, review.
Mm.
It's an important thing to ask for, negotiating for your position. And even though you don't feel like you're in a place of huge leverage or negotiation, that concerns you. And they probably want to know, how they're going to stay at that company if they're going to pay off that loan. So there's going to be some give and take as to how you're going to negotiate that.
Hmm.
But any kind of help or any kind of recognition that you receive monetarily will
Hmm.
be important.
What I'm hearing is it's important to have some type of plan,
Right.
some type of foresight of a year later, can we discuss this? Or, like you said, give and take. I'm thinking negotiating salary, not direct loan forgiveness, but you can negotiate a little bit more in salary and consideration of the whole benefits package, right?
Correct.
So that's a great concept, right? Have a plan in place, not just for that one negotiation, but looking ahead.
Right. We always have steps in the plan. So
Yeah.
there's always sort of a goal and then steps to get there. And I think it's easiest when you have, task like a loan or any kind of task or saving
Right.
for a mortgage or any kind of savings that you're looking for. You just break it down into small steps and it doesn't feel quite
Mhm.
so overwhelming.
Yeah.
And some of the origination for the loan, down the interest rate.
Mm.
And so that's another thing to ask for. How can I lower down my interest rate if I, time or pay early or little chunks, extra? How can I make an extra payment? So when
Mhm.
you ask these types of questions, start to understand you're going to be a very good credit, line,
Sure.
and you want to pay off and you want to accelerate.
Yeah.
So that's very helpful.
Well, let's dive a little bit further into that and move on to a question around budgeting. How do you start a budget? Never too early, but also
Never too late.
we have recent graduates. It's their first time really receiving a significant paycheck.
Exactly.
Likely, they have some type of loan. There's some long term plan to potentially own a home or start a family or even go back to school, right? How do you build a budget and how do you sort it through various life changes?
That's a good question because people ask us about budgeting at all ages, but particularly when you graduate and you do get a significant, what seems to you a significant amount of money that
Yeah.
you're being paid, which is great, but it's also makes one nervous and people get very excited about this huge amount
Mm.
of money. And so again, it's kind of a step-by-step plan. But the first thing you have to do is you have to know your number.
Mhm.
And that number is what are you going to receive on a monthly basis from either your job or maybe you have a sort of a second job or a little bit of income that maybe you've kept going from college.
Mhm.
You need to know what that after tax number is. And the after tax is kind of the important thing that we're talking about here. It can't be pre-tax because then you're not
Right.
dealing with the correct number. So you get that number and then you start there. That's kind of the base. And that's the base of your knowledge. And then you go from there and you put down on a piece of paper, you write down everything that you are going to have to pay for. And that is like your lights and groceries, your internet and your phone. And all of a sudden, you're going to have to be paying for these things and
Mhm.
rent. So you write all those things down and you have to figure out what those are. Now, maybe if some of those things are a little variable, like, the amount of electricity you're going to use, or I don't know, the amount of heat that you're gonna have to pay for. So you'll break that down and then you'll write it down, either make a little spreadsheet or however you would like to keep track. And then usually what you would do is try a month and what these expenses are. Then there is the second group of expenses. Well, there are actually a number of them, but there's a second group of expenses that are things that you need, but you don't have to have. Now, we all need groceries, but it's a little different if you shop at Whole Foods as opposed to a convenience store, which is also really expensive,
Mhm.
or just your normal grocery store. And you want to try to curtail that or, get an idea what that looks like. And then there's sort of another layer of things that you would love to have and spend money for, and that's entertainment, travel, things that you would love to have, a cool bag or cool tennis shoes or
Mhm.
whatever that is. So that's another category. And then there's just another category, which is also important. It shouldn't be down the road, but it's called an emergency fund. So we
Mhm.
talk a lot about this. And what that is putting a little money away in savings that are safe, not necessarily something that could fluctuate, but super safe. So if in fact you lose your job, or something happens, or I don't know, you have to pay for a speeding ticket or
Mhm.
whatever it might be, that you're ready and that you have that little pot that you're ready for. So those are sort of your categories. The first category, which is your needs and your must haves, that's about 50% of your budget.
Mhm.
And then the next group is kind of the groceries. It's a little bit variable, a little bit discretionary. That's about 30%. And then 20% is sort of the things that you
Mhm.
are really little luxuries. I don't know what that would be. Could be getting a facial, could be,
A
going out.
concert,
Yeah, and
going out
going
to
doing something
eat,
with your guy
yeah.
friends or whatever,
Mhm.
or going to a really nice restaurant that maybe is a
Mhm.
little above your budget.
Yeah.
So once you sort of get comfortable with these categories, it's very key about like when your rent is or when your mortgage
Mhm.
is. Can you time that with your salary? Most people get paid twice during the month.
Mhm.
Usually the first payment is to pay your rent, and the second payment is kind of all the rest.
Mhm.
And then budgeting, how you do that. You want to have a lot of money left over at the end of the month. That's the
Mhm.
goal. And then you break down smaller goals that you're looking for, whether it's an experience or whether it's something that you'd like to buy or whether you'd like to buy a home or a condo.
Mhm.
And a piece of real estate. Maybe you want to buy a small investment home and fix it up, like a
Mhm.
duplex somewhere. These are all good ideas.
Yeah. It sounds like it takes a little bit of discipline, right? It takes effort to
It
consider
does.
how you're spending a paycheck, to be a little bit more aware of what you're spending, to have a little bit extra at the end of the month, versus feeling, like you can spend all of it.
Right.
Um, do you have any recommendations for, let's say, younger graduates who really are almost living paycheck to paycheck? I again, we'll go out on a limb and say that probably causes some anxiety,
Oh, yeah.
right? When you can't meet that 50-30-20 kind of framework, would you have in that, first college period where you probably are living a little bit more paycheck to
Right.
paycheck than is ideal? What recommendations would you have to help maybe assuage some of that anxiety?
I don't know. I ate a lot of ramen noodles. I know that. So there's some tools that can help, in all honesty. Um, you could use a cool app on your phone called Mint.
Mhm.
It kind of tracks things and sort of helps you keep track, and it maybe gets you back on track. Um, you just have to be, the first couple of years, after you graduate, you're just going to have to be really careful. It does produce some anxiety, but doing this sort of step-by-step method and creating sort of a little spreadsheet for yourself,
Mhm.
however you want to do it, you have to really keep track. And it's probably the first time you've ever had to do this. So it is scary, but at least if you're keeping track, then you kind of know you're not like getting crazy with your credit card or you're not kind of blowing your budget. This will be something, if you try really hard at the beginning,
Mhm.
this will be a really good discipline, which I know is a little boring, but a discipline for the rest of your life. And if you're always living within your means, underneath your paycheck, even if it's, paycheck to paycheck, you'll start to maybe get a little bonus, or you're going to start to ask for a raise. You're going to start to see, little things that, are sort of helpful and like a little
Mhm.
green shoot or a little light. And you're
Mhm.
just going to have to be really careful. So the Mint, the spreadsheet, using Quicken, that's
Mhm.
helpful. Just keeping track of everything and trying to pay off your credit card every single month.
Yeah.
That's where a lot of recent grads get into a lot of trouble. And they kind of like, oh, I'll just put it on the credit card, or oh, I'll just do that. And then I'll pay it off at the end of the month. And then all of a sudden you're carrying a balance at 18 to 25%, and you're wasting a lot of money, and you start to get into some bad habits and some trouble
Yeah.
that will kind of continue with you because you're kind of thinking like, I'll work my way out of it, or I'll get like a side gig or a second job. Now that's an okay thing to do too. In addition, some sort of hobby, or, I don't know, power washing or something that you could do yourself and start your own little business. So it's very hard. I lived paycheck to paycheck. And when I worked at Merrill Lynch, I worked on commission at that time, and we cold called, which you can't do anymore. And so I'd call 300 or 400 people a day.
Wow.
And so I know what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck. And I lived in New York on commission. It was tricky. I looked for happy hours that had food. And so I did a lot of different things. I went to the cheapest place to buy phones or electronics. I was lucky to be in New York. You could find everything extremely cheaply. It's weird, but you have to look for sales. If you want to buy some sort of item, you make sure that you have the money before you purchase it. And then the way that I explain it to people is, if it's not in your bank account and it is not available to you, you probably shouldn't buy it.
Yeah.
So you should save up whatever that thing is that you want to buy, or that next thing that you would like to own. And if you don't have the cash to buy it, like in your bank account, by your debit, then you probably shouldn't buy it. So it's a hard thing to learn. You've got student loans, which is a lot of pressure. You have your job. You're sort of dealing with a different kind of schedule. It's very tricky.
I appreciated the way that you phrased it of, it's habit building. It's good habit that will carry through the rest of your life, because even when you do have money, it doesn't mean that you have to overpay for something. Even when you do have a little bit of extra, it doesn't mean, that you
Exactly.
just have to be spending it,
Right.
really, right? Paying off your credit cards every month, that comes back to our loan conversation, right? And one thing I didn't really tackle there is the consideration of, I'm going to say this, a good debt versus bad debt, right? So
Right.
a home loan or an auto loan, like
Correct.
you might consider okay debt, right? You
Correct.
don't typically have that out of pocket, versus credit card, debt.
Correct.
Interest rates are higher. You typically don't want to carry that, as much,
Right.
right? Back into negotiating your paycheck. This is going to get a little bit more nuanced, but sort of the pre-tax, post-tax, right? So for retirement savings,
Good question.
or for, health savings accounts, sometimes there's a commuter savings account, things that can be pulled out of your paycheck pre-tax so that you're not technically taxed on it as income.
Correct.
It can fluctuate your monthly net, right? What actually shows up in your bank account,
Right.
but can help you save.
Correct.
How would you look at that in the landscape of budgeting and considerations for what to take out pre-tax versus what you may need to live on? And how do you talk about that balance with your clients?
It's a really good question. We talk about it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So we are big proponents of pre-tax, meaning that is the things that are taken out of your paycheck before you pay federal tax, or before you pay Pennsylvania or whatever state you live in. So we are huge proponents of investing and pulling out as much money as you can stand in your 401k. You always want to be able to receive a match. Many companies will match the amount of money that you put in the 401k. So you have to put it in, and then they match the exact amount. Now, sometimes it's dollar for dollar, and sometimes it's maybe 50 cents on the dollar. And it fluctuates whether it's 3% of your pay or 6% or 8%. Some companies are extremely rich. So we are very, very adamant of taking out and doing the match at your company. It's good to know that in your 401k, you can put in $22,500 a year. And a lot of people don't know that. They feel like they're doing the max, which is the match, but they could be doing more. So anyway, we're very big proponents of putting money away pre-tax, because if you don't see it, you don't spend it. And that's a really big thing. And so it builds in there every single paycheck. So other things that could be in there could be Maybe you have to pay some for medical. You could do a health savings account, so that would be a good thing. Just one thing back on the 401k, we're very, very big on having you put in to your 401k a Roth 401k.
Mm,
Many, many companies offer it. If they don't offer it, you need to ask your company to get that.
mhm,
It is something that's important, and it's much more flexible. If you left that company, then your money gets transferred and rolls over to a Roth IRA,
mm,
which is an individual retirement account. And that is a much more flexible IRA. When you get older, you could use it for a first time home. You could use the money and take it out after 5 years. There's a lot of flexibility. So that's a big thing. You're probably maybe going to have money taken out for healthcare, maybe vision, maybe dental are extras. Also, there's probably health insurance in there
mhm,
that you can opt for. The larger corporations have sort of like a whole like buffet, and you can check things like you probably don't want maybe a maternity thing if you're not married,
mhm,
but maybe if you wear glasses, you'd like the vision. Maybe if you're thinking about getting braces in the future, you would choose the
mhm,
dental. So it's literally like a whole buffet you can pick and choose, which is
mhm,
nice. Um, but the pre-tax is important, and getting the match is super important.
mhm,
And then either having somebody help you with the investments or select like a Standard and Poor's
mhm,
large company index fund so that your funds are growing in there. And they're growing in there tax deferred also. So you don't pay
mhm.
any tax on the money that's in your 401k.
Something that was shared with me when considering what to take out pre-tax was the realization, because of the way percentages work, that just because you take X amount out pre-tax doesn't mean you are losing that same amount in your paycheck because you're not being taxed on as much, right? So if you take
Correct.
$500 out, you're being taxed at a lower rate. And so you technically aren't always losing
Right.
$500 in your net, which was so interesting to me of the trade-off of being willing to put more out pre-tax to get that match and still not having to give that much up
Correct.
monthly.
Correct.
Um,
And
and
it's powerful. Sorry, I don't mean
no,
to
that's
interrupt you.
okay.
It's super powerful, this compounding that goes on
Hmm.
every month. Not only you're adding to the investment that is yours, nobody can ever take what you put into your 401k away from you. There
Hmm.
are sort of increments where maybe the company's trying to see if you're going to stay. And if you stay there for 4 years, that's kind of the max. But the 4 years, then you get the money that you put in and you get the money that the company put in.
Yeah.
So people have to be willing to understand like this is building for your future. This is money you always have, and you're not paying tax on the money going in, and you're not paying any capital gains. So it's a powerful compounding, building, and the investment's growing. So it's not
Yeah.
just that the money goes in there $100 and sits there. It's $100 and then it gets interest and it gets growth every single day. And then you get another $100 that goes in another couple weeks. And
Hmm.
it's very powerful.
And the realization of the resources that are available to you through your employer. I mean,
Right.
typically, even small scale employers will have some type of resource available where you can talk about what you're invested in.
Right.
Even just the realization that those accounts essentially work as an investment account, that
Right.
it isn't just I'm putting X amount of dollars every month in and it's sort of mildly accruing, right?
Right.
That as the market changes, that investment could change as well for the better and maybe sometimes for the worse, but it's
Right.
a long term investment.
And yeah, over time, if your money's in the stock market, it's going to earn
Hmm.
8%
Yeah,
over a long period of time. But now sometimes it might earn 20 and sometimes it might earn, -1.
yeah,
But over the long period of time, you're going to be seeing
yeah.
some substantial growth.
And it's so important to think about everything as sort of a comprehensive package, right?
Right.
When you're negotiating what is most important to you then, what is most important to you in the long term, when you're looking at an employer and balancing a salary consideration versus maybe their retirement match
Right.
or a health insurance cost, right? What is that full picture? Which actually leads us into, the next idea of um, how do we build out goals, right? We have a budget, we understand that our overall goal is to have as much money left over as possible,
Hmm.
right? But then what do we do with that, right? It can go into an account, it can go in towards our retirement. Those are kind of the obvious ones. But what about everything in between? How do we think about sort of our financial plan and set up some goals for that?
Yeah, that's a big question. So it's the same sort of concept of doing the budget. Everything sort of has plans, and you could have goals that are short term,
Mhm.
in the next 3 to 6 months. It might be a trip that you want to save for, it might be an item for your apartment. It might be, it could be anything.
Mhm.
Then there's midterm goals, which are sort of, 1 to 3 years. Maybe that goal is you want to have maybe some money that is for a down payment, or maybe just a larger item. Um, and then a sort of a longer term goal, which would maybe be 5 years and beyond, and that would either be retirement, or maybe that you're, again, saving for a house or kids or that
Mhm.
kind of thing. So it's a little larger. In any of these instances, you want to list the goal. You want to create some of the smaller steps on how you're going to get there. Now, maybe as you get going in your career, you're maybe trimming down your budget a little bit, and then you're saving, you're taking some money and saving. The other thing that we do for a lot of people is we do an automatic debit, and
Mm.
we create either an individual account or their retirement account. Usually it's an individual account if they're saving for a goal, and we do an auto debit, and it comes right out of their checking account or savings account, just the way you did it with your 401k. So
Mhm.
it's the same principle. If you don't see it, you won't spend it. And so it comes out. And so we help people manage these goals. How much do you think you need? How much is the goal itself that you're saving for? Um, and how are you going to get there monthly? You just break it down, even monthly or weekly. How are you going to get there? How much money is that? Is that a couple cups of coffee at Starbucks? Or is it something a little different, foregoing something?
Mhm.
So you break that down into something that you can manage and you can figure out weekly. And then you kind of track it. You could track it on Mint. You could track it. There's all kinds of things and ways to track it. You could track it on
Mhm.
Quicken. Um, and then, if you splurge or go on a trip, or you've decided to go to a concert or something like that, you just kind of get back on track. And you're like, okay, I made a mistake. I screwed that up. I had tons of fun. And you just kind of get back on track. So you break things down into small increments, and then reward yourself when you got to that goal.
Mhm.
And so I think that's a fun thing to do. And it's very satisfying to see you paid off a part of your loan. You have to have like little successes.
Mhm.
You've gone 3 or 4 months, saving for your goal. Okay, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to do something fun.
Sure.
So you have to kind of give and take a little bit, because you created the goal, and then you keep track.
Mhm.
But don't punish yourself and beat yourself up
Right.
because, you're not quite on track, or it's going to take you another year to get that down payment or do whatever you're going to do.
Yeah.
Um, and then, look at things, that are connected to your goal.
Sure.
So
Yeah,
it's tricky.
I appreciate that feedback of, don't punish yourself, don't be too hard on yourself, right? Life happens, you have
Right.
to enjoy life. If something negative could happen too, right? You could suddenly lose your job or
Correct.
dip into your emergency funds, and that takes you off track for a moment, but that's reality.
Exactly. And we suggest, it sounds like a lot, but we suggest that people have 6 months worth of their salary
Hmm.
in an account that is like totally safe,
Yes.
that's not necessarily fluctuating, and they don't dip into it. It's there either in a CD or a treasury bond or something that's very, very safe.
Hmm.
So it's something that I think people need to think about. You need to sort of plan for the worst
Hmm.
and then save for the best, and sort of keep everything in checks and balances, because your life's always sort of in flux.
Let's go into that a little bit. You mentioned a CD, a treasury bond, right? I am assuming those are different ways to invest money that you do have available to you,
Correct.
cash that you have available to you. Um, let's move into this section of building our wealth, right? We're in a good spot. We have our savings saved up. We have enough money that we feel I can come to a financial planner and have them do something
Right.
with this,
That's right.
right?
That's fun.
That's the goal. That was our short-term goal, and we got there, right? How do we build out that investment, right? How do we find that right mix of utilizing cash or using assets that are available to us? And there's a lot of noise around that,
Yeah.
right? So how do we navigate that?
Good question. It's sort of like, where do you start?
Right.
it's complicated because you're always being stretched in a lot of different directions. You have your savings and you have your 401k at work, and then, you have stuff that you want to do and you want things that you'd like to buy and own. So you just, again, start little by little. We think of investing in somebody's life like a pyramid. So at the bottom is the very safest things, and those are the CDs. So we usually start that somebody would open up an individual account. And it's in their name. It's just like a bank account, a savings account. And in there, you'd start out with a CD, that's a short term, 3 months. So we think people should never be in cash. You should always be earning money on your cash. And so right now it's, about 3.7, used to be 4% a couple of months ago, but 4% on your money is better than it's sitting in your bank account doing nothing. So we think that's important, that you have sort of a base, and that's something that doesn't fluctuate. It's guaranteed. It's very quiet. It's something that is very stable. So that would be a treasury bond, a certificate of deposit. It could be a municipal bond, anything that you start out with $1,000 per se, and in 3 months or 6 months you get the $1,000 back, and you get the 4% interest, and then you roll that over and you do it again and again and again, and so that grows. And then as people get going, we suggest that they purchased usually a diversified mutual fund. And a mutual fund is just a collection of things. And so we start with a collection of companies that are the US large cap companies. And so those are all, people think, oh, investing's super complicated. But we're like, you buy these things every day.
Sure.
You make decisions and you buy things at Target. You buy things at Dick's. You buy, you drink Coca-Cola. You go to Starbucks. You wear Nikes. You have Apple products. So you, in this mutual fund, is going to be things that you already know and love and support and purchase and feel that they're of high quality. So over time, those are the larger sort of growth, and industrial companies are in there. Healthcare companies would be in there. Companies that provide your electricity, companies that, have the computers, companies that make the materials and the things that you wear. So that's a large S&P index fund. So start there and just continue to build. And the same thing, a little auto debit, never missed it. And there it is growing. And then you get an IRA, which is an individual retirement account. And so we usually have people invest in both of those things at the same time. So it's a little tricky, but we feel that you should have, if you had, say $300, $100 would go into your individual retirement account, and then the $200 would go into your individual account. So if you were really just wanting to save and have that money be very flexible, then you would just stick with the individual account. But we kind of like to have people have both.
A little bit more diversified. And,
Right.
Yeah. So just to reiterate, right, bottom of the pyramid, we have a certificate of deposit or a treasury bond. Essentially, you're committing to give a portion of money towards something that you won't be able to access for a period of time with a guaranteed return on it, right? Like if you buy a CD for 3 to 6 months, it's sort of locked for 3 to 6 months.
Correct. And then there's
the
a penalty.
government has, access to that $1,000, right?
But not with the treasury.
Okay.
That's why we buy treasuries.
Okay.
So the treasuries, there's no penalty to sell.
Oh,
So if we
interesting.
but decided to buy, it's a treasury bill that's within 1 year maturity. So the treasury bill, you would put your $1,000 in, and if we had it we can do it for any day, any day of the month. So say it's a 4-month treasury bill. At the end of the 4 months, you get your $1,000 back. But if for some reason there was something unforeseen that happened, you got into a car accident, you needed to pay for that, or something happened to somebody in your family, you could sell the treasury that next day and you'd have the cash the following day. So it's very liquid. That's why we like it. Also, with the treasury, you don't pay tax on the interest income from for the state. So it's issued by the federal
Interesting.
government, but you don't pay any state tax on it.
Amazing.
And it's completely liquid, and there's no penalty.
I did not know that.
So we prefer those over the CD.
Yeah.
And it's a little more higher on the hierarchy. CDs are issued by banks, whereas the treasury bill is the United States Treasury.
Oh, okay.
So we like
Thank
them,
you.
super liquid, and
Yeah.
you get that extra little kicker.
And so again, just to reiterate a little bit of what I'm hearing, right? Anytime you have excess cash, whether, you're putting it in your emergency fund or however you're considering that to be excess, whether you're saving for a goal, et cetera, right? There is an opportunity to have that money accrue,
Correct.
either in a retirement account that can be invested in accrue, either in this certificate of deposit or a treasury bond, or as you find that you have a little bit more free cash to really invest in something that potentially you're passionate about, you believe in, you use every day, you trust to a degree,
Correct.
right? There's always these opportunities to make a little bit more on what you've saved.
Correct.
Um, and where does something like a high yield savings account or high yield checking account fall into that? How do you?
Good question. We utilize those two for our clients. We do all of our business and clearing through Charles Schwab.
Mhm,
So I think it's really important. I think people feel like when they put money into an investment account, it's like a black hole and they never see it and they can't touch it. And it's very restrictive and they feel like they'll never get it back. But we try to encourage people that the relationship is different. So we make a connection with their bank and the Charles Schwab account already, and we can move money back and forth.
mhm,
We can move money into Charles Schwab, and if there is some sort of issue or you'd like your money, we just send it and it's there in your bank that afternoon.
mhm,
And then people can also see everything on the app on their phone.
mm,
So they can see if they got some interest income in that treasury or the CD came due and they got some interest income. They can see if a dividend hit the account.
mhm,
So it's very transparent and I think it makes people more comfortable
mhm,
and it's not so black boxish. So now to get to your point of the high yield checking, we do have that at Schwab, what's connected with the Schwab Bank. And, it's definitely useful if somebody wants to have some in and out. Also, just to say, with the normal account that we were talking about, the individual account,
mhm,
they can write checks off that, and a person could have a credit card. Now, we don't necessarily recommend it because if the credit card gets lost, that's usually a larger sum of money that's in that account. But they could write checks off of that, and
mhm,
they would be earning money there through the CD or the Treasury. But there is also high yield investor checking, and it's probably about, I think, whatever, 3.5%.
mhm,
And it's available and it's easy. And, you would have checks and it
mhm,
gives you a higher rate of interest. It's usually, Schwab is usually a little bit higher than the banks.
mhm,
Um, so it's something that we set up for clients and it's all connected together. And again, you can see everything on your phone.
mhm,
So it's nice to have things all in one place and be centralized. We also use an interesting platform that we use for financial planning, and it's called eMoney.
mhm,
Everything with a username and password gets connected into eMoney. So you could put your credit cards, you could put your student loans, you could put your bank accounts, obviously your Schwab accounts are there. You could put your insurance in there. So everything you could put your 401k in there. So you get to see everything and you would feel a certain satisfaction of seeing some growth,
yeah,
either paying off your debt and that being smaller, and then conversely, investments getting larger, your 401k getting larger. So you
mhm,
would get these sort of satisfying indicators that you're on the right track and you're building and you're doing
yeah,
things. You could put your mortgage in there. Um, so it's very nice because it comes up with graphics and it's very colorful.
mhm.
So it's sort of like Mint on steroids.
Sure,
And
sure.
so it's nice to see that. But
I like the theme that I'm sort of hearing throughout, this conversation that is you have a sense of agency and you have ownership
right,
over, what happens with your money, what you do with your money, of course, the traditional discipline we were discussing. But just to tie a thread, when you're a young graduate, you can access student discounts, you can cost
right,
share, you can find cheaper ways to get groceries and save as best as you can, right? But even as you earn more money, you're still a customer, you're still a consumer of these financial institutions
correct,
and of your employer, right? You're an employee, but you have agency in that. And just finding space in all of that to really speak up and advocate for yourself, finding the highest interest rate to earn you the best money or renegotiating your loans,
correct,
right? That you don't have to feel stuck.
right.
And I love the theme that's coming out of that of you are in control of your money. You can
You are.
access your money even if it's invested,
Right.
right? You don't have to feel like it's gone and out of sight. So I really appreciate that theme that we're kind of carrying through. We don't have to be beholden to the institutions and our paychecks and things like that as much as maybe we
I
think.
totally agree. That's a very good summary. Um, as to what we've talked about so far. And I want to sort of continue upon that and impress upon people that you can change banks, you can change your mortgage company. I mean, you can move things around. You can, I mean, I'm not saying that you like constantly get a new credit card every couple months because you don't like the balance that you have,
Right.
but you can do things intelligently, but you have to be careful. You have to do a little bit of research. I remember when I first got my first condo, it was the first purchase that I made that was very large. I must have called like 40 regional banks and of all sizes all over Pittsburgh to find what I thought was the best deal. My goal was not to pay any points, not to pay any insurance, and not to pay a mortgage broker, nothing against them, and get the lowest rate that I could.
Yeah.
And I felt like it was silly to pay points, but sometimes it makes sense. And looked for the best terms that I could get. So if you do some things yourself instead of like putting that aside, like, oh, that's way too complicated, you can, it doesn't have to require a lot of time, but a little time and thought in asking questions, even if you don't know anything, if you start to look at life insurance or if you start to go down the path of, looking at a house, you have to ask a lot of questions.
Yeah.
So just being super curious and, as you say, being in control is very important, and asking for a lower rate on
Yeah.
your student loan. So not to be afraid of it, to really sort of embrace and I all the time, raise my hand or say, I have no idea what you're talking about. If I get into a medical situation or wherever I am, I'm like, I have no idea what you just said. You need to say that in baby talk. And
Yeah.
just don't be afraid,
Yeah.
because the more you understand and the more you read a little bit,
Yeah.
and don't leave it up to somebody else.
Yeah.
So we do have a number of female clients, and they're like, oh yeah, somebody else will handle that. I'm like, no, you're going to need to handle that,
Yeah.
because you're always going to need to know. And don't take every piece of advice you receive on the golf course or at the Steeler game.
Yeah.
Anyway, I digress.
Well, let's go there for a second. I'll pull us back to central topic, but um, you mentioned buying a home and just thinking about all the people that are involved in that, right? You have a real estate agent, you potentially have a mortgage broker if you have the lender, maybe you have a title company, or you do have a title company, right? There's all types of taxes. You mentioned points to buy down interest rate. Um, I'm going through the list of potentials, right? Not to dive into that topic specifically, but when it comes to money management or when it comes to big purchases like that, do you have sort of a recommendation of questions you would suggest somebody ask a potential financial planner or someone who potentially is going to help them spend a lot of money,
Right.
just to gauge how much you can either trust or understand that person's ability to help you navigate from your point of view?
Are you asking me to give you ideas and questions about what you ask your financial planner when you're looking for a financial planner?
Yeah.
Understood. I think I would have a good understanding of their philosophy. I would have an understanding on how they're going to manage your money, how much they're going to communicate with you, what their fees are, what type of investments would they think are going to be appropriate for you, and what type of investments might you grow into. Do they provide other services such as financial planning or money management or risk management, talking about insurance? Would they be able to give you some, advice as you go along about buying a house or about a major purchase? And what other professionals do they know that could help you? Would they be able to connect you with an accountant if you needed one? Would they be able to connect you with an estate planner, which is important to, to do a will later on? Well, it's actually good for everybody to have a will. And just how much help would they be, or would they just do your investments? And so you kind of have to know, you have to understand the limit of their services and the scope of what they really do. And it's okay however they answer, but depending on what you're looking for, would sway you to go one place or the other. So a lot of questions, I think, is probably the best. And do you have a semblance of trust? Did you get to them by a referral? Did you find them, through Instagram? Just do what you would do or what I would do for anything, I would just do some background checks
Yeah.
and see if they're, passed and qualified and passed certain exams.
Yeah. So we're at the point in our life where now we have reached most of our goals, right? We're in a stable financial position and we potentially have the opportunity to make a larger impact, such as donating some of our money or, um, maybe even trying to support our family. How do we make our wealth work for impact? What are the considerations in that? And where do you feel like that kind of comes into the um, larger framework of goal setting?
That's a good question. You're asking a person that is a lifelong learner and places a huge emphasis on education.
Mm,
So I think it's not like a switch is flipped and all of a sudden you should start thinking about making donations and gifts to your college or high school, mainly your college, I guess.
mhm,
I think it's something that starts sort of the day that you graduate. Even if you send your college $5 or $10, it's kind of a key thing. They gave you an incredible education. There were tons of professors that spent a lot of time. You had ability to participate in athletics or theater or whatever you wanted to do. So I think it begins early. It just becomes maybe a little more sophisticated as you get going. Cash is always the most beneficial gift that you can give tax wise as a deduction,
mm,
for yourself. But many people don't have to itemize, so that becomes less of an important thing. But tax laws can change all the time.
mm,
So there's many, many different ways to gift. You can possibly gift through a company match. Like if you gave the $10, your company would match your $10. So another thing to ask, your HR or benefits person. You could, as you get going, if you bought an individual stock, say like Apple or Coke, it's usually a good idea to take the stock that has the smallest amount of dividend or money that you would receive on a quarterly basis. It's usually a growth stock, and maybe you've made some money in that growth stock. To take a couple of those shares and give those to a school. And you can directly send them from your Schwab account or whatever account, Fidelity account, and you can send it directly to the University of Pittsburgh.
mm,
They then, in turn, have to cash that and use that money.
mhm,
So that's a really important way to gift. And it's kind of like no skin off your nose because you've made a little bit of money on that. And the university would certainly appreciate it.
mhm,
There's other ways that you can make gifts. You can start like a donor advised fund at a community fund, meaning that you would give a little larger piece of money and you would create a fund at, say, the Pittsburgh Foundation,
mhm,
and you would create that fund, and then you could give that the money that is thrown off by interest and growth. You could give that to your church. You could give that to Pitt. You could give
mhm,
that to a nonprofit organization. And what we counsel our clients is that they would be able to bunch a number of donations all together in one year, and then they'd be able to make gifts from there.
mhm,
You'd get a tax deduction for the big piece that went over to the Pittsburgh Foundation or a community foundation in your state. And then you would be able to, that money would grow and you'd be able to make gifts in perpetuity. You could name your kids
mhm,
the successor uh, donors, and they would take over the granting of the gifts.
mhm,
We also manage the money or manage pieces of money for the Pittsburgh Foundation. So we're very close with them. They do a very nice job, and they could help you if you wanted to give a gift per se to some specific type of charity,
mhm,
either a health or equine therapy or whatever.
mm,
So they also have good ideas, and it's a very nice resource.
mm,
So that's another way, donor advised fund. You could gift money through EITC, which is a state-run program in Pennsylvania. I believe it's in other states, but I don't know how many others. And what they're doing is it only can be used for financial aid, but you have to fill out a very short form. You send that into the EITC. They would be actually using your state tax dollars that you're paying to the state, and they would take that and send that to an educational institution,
mm,
but only for financial aid.
mm,
So it's a very, very good way to direct your own tax dollars Obviously, you paid the taxes, so
Yeah.
it's no skin off your nose, and they direct that money to a financial institution.
And I appreciate that information so much because initially, and I fell into the trap when we think about philanthropy, it's, oh, when I have more money, I can do it. But
Not
truthfully, it's just about, again, being in control,
right,
knowing your options, and how to utilize the money that you have available to you to make the impact that you want,
right.
which I love.
Earlier the better.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
fantastic.
it's just a little habit.
Well, we're going to wrap up here today. Thank you so much for sharing all of this information. Do you want to share a little bit about the consulting resource that you were speaking about, sort of the more one-off opportunity that if somebody wanted an
Mhm.
hour or two of advice,
Yes.
what that is and how they could go about doing that?
So it's very easy. I think the first step would just be to book an appointment through our website, and then we'd have a really short, like 15-minute consultation, and then we would decide what the scope of work is. We'd send
Mhm.
you an agreement. We always do agreements. We'd send an agreement electronically to be signed, and then off we go as to whatever we needed to do. So it's a very good way to be able to talk to people before maybe they're ready to invest tons of money and they have questions about everything.
Mhm.
So it's a nice way, like a precursor to get
Mhm.
going.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Beth.
Oh, you're welcome,
Thank you for
Cassie.
helping our alumni, and hopefully some of them can reach out to you and have financial freedom.
Yeah, sounds great. I've enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you. You as well.